Hello there, guys. This is Christy Lewis from Dostoevsky in Space. Today I am here with The Way of Kings, and I'm not done with it yet. I'm probably maybe a third of the way through it, but this book has to go back to the library, so I'm gonna have to switch over to an audiobook copy. I just wanted to say, too, I'm so obsessed with the new typeface that they're using for The Way of Kings. It's so cool. I forget what, but the way they're using like the shadow behind the text and making it look so 3D, like it's a really cool typeface. So I'm going to be going through all of my notes, and I will update you again with all of my notes once I finish the book. I haven't really looked through them since I made these notes. So it's like, I don't know what's even there. I don't know what we're talking about yet. Excited to jump into it. And I'm doing this because I never have reviewed these books on my channel, but this is my second Storm Along that I'm co-hosting, so I feel like now is the time to do a review. So here we go. Okay, so the first quote that I have here: each was a masterly work of art, flowing in design, inscribed with glyphs and patterns. He recognized each one's. If their masters had died, their blades would have vanished. So this is with Kalak, I think is the man. It's in the prelude to the Stormlight Archive, and he's describing the blades. What are these blades called? I forget now. So I don't think that are they called shard blades, or is this a different kind of blade? I don't remember, but I was just so interested to find out what kind of weapon these are, because I think they're different than shard blades. I'm loving that we're getting more information about things like the prelude and the epigraphs. Oh, there's no epigraph on the prelude, but every chapter there's like an epigraph throughout the book. It's exciting to start knowing what these things are, because we're going on book 5 now of Stormlight Archives, coming out at the end of this year. So, okay, and then my next quote is, "What do we tell the people, Jezrien?" Kalak asked. "What will they say of this?" So this is them discussing what they're going to tell everyone when they quit their job of fighting in every... what's the word called? They continually fight and die in these desolations. I guess that... So, yeah, the terminology is like way over my head, even though this is literally my third time reading this series. I don't remember the terminology very well, and I'm immersion reading, so sometimes I miss things, but I'm enjoying the ride possibly even more than I did the second time through. The second time through when I was reading these, I enjoyed them, but I think I was working really hard on understanding them and coming up with questions for Stormalong 2020. So this time I'm not coming up with discussion questions. I'm literally just enjoying it, and I'm flexing my time to make time for it. And otherwise I wouldn't have time for it if I was trying to really study it in depth. But 2020 was a different time. We all had less going on in 2020. I actually didn't have a job in 2020 because I was homesick, and I wasn't currently making content for the library, but now I do. So I think I'm enjoying this as much, more than the third time through. So, but the first time through was definitely like it was just one of the highlights of my reading life. Reading The Way of Kings, Words of Radiance, and Oathbringer the first time through. I'm having trouble deciding whether I love these or Mistborn more, because I think Mistborn being complete, Mistborn Era 1, made me love them more for a long time, but this reread is going so well that I'm just like, maybe I do love these more. The character work is just so good in this series. Anyways, we're gonna have lots to talk about here. So Jezrien answers Kalak, "It's simple. We tell them that they finally won. It's an easy enough lie. Who knows, maybe it will turn out to be true." So I'm so interested. Like, I imagine we're going to be seeing these happen again, these desolations. Okay, so we're in the prologue now. They did not seem offended. They did not seem angry. And yet they were going to break their treaty of only a few hours. It made no sense. But Zeth did not ask questions. So we know now what's going on with Zeth. The first time you're reading through this, you're like, why is this assassin just following somebody's orders and not even knowing what's going on? Like, why is he... it's just such a baffling situation the first time you're reading it through. You're like, why are the Parshendi breaking their treaty that they just made with the Alethi in such a drastic way? But now we know Szeth has an oath stone and he has to follow orders, or at least he thinks he has to follow orders at this point. And yeah, I don't remember. I know that we get, I don't want to spoil things too much for future books, so I won't talk too much about the Parshendi at this point. But we do get more information about the Parshendi motives in future books. So yeah, I'm really excited to be rereading through this because I don't remember, like I read it in 2020 and I don't remember much about what I read in 2020. So, okay. It's now 2024. Okay. So next is he lashed it downward, then did it again. He lashed a fourth time as Gavilar stepped onto the balcony. It lurched under the extra weight. The wood cracked, straining. This scene when Szeth is trying to kill Gavilar, I don't know that I probably did follow it the first time I read this through, but I don't remember the scenes very vividly in my head. But this was just so cool, the way he was putting lashings on the balcony so that it had added weight with every lashing, and then it just broke. It's incredible. It's an incredible use of magic, and I think there's going to be a lot of that going forward in the series that we can't even imagine yet. The use of lashings is going to be crazy. And Szeth is just ahead of the game here. Okay, and then last page of this chapter, or this opening chapter. It's not a prologue. It's not the prelude, it's the prologue, I think. So anyways, he pulled out a small crystalline sphere tied to a chain. You must take this. They must not get it. He seemed dazed. Tell my brother he must find the most important words a man can say. Gavilar fell still. So this is Gavilar talking to Szeth and telling him, I don't remember what this sphere is around Gavilar's neck, so I think that's why I marked it, because I was like, what is this sphere that he gives to Szeth? It's giving me hardcore when Dumbledore gave the snitch to Harry. Like, he didn't give it to him, but it was in his will. You know, that's what I'm remembering, but it has nothing to do with that, but that's what I'm remembering. So, very curious to see what happens with that. Okay, next, we're entering part 1 Above Silence, which is Kaladin and Shallan. So, we're in Kaladin's point of view for this next this next mark. Okay. Okay, and what I wrote on the mark was, I forgot how much I loved Kaladin. Maybe book 1 is my favorite. That's what I'm talking about. That's how much I'm enjoying this reread. Maybe book 1 is my favorite now. It is Kaladin's book, and Kaladin is my favorite character, so it would make sense if book 1 was my favorite. I think the first time through, book 2 is my favorite, but not because I didn't like book 1. I loved book 1, but then book 2 was just like, so, like, the pacing. It was so powerful in the situations. The whole scene, all the scenes with, like, Kaladin and Shallan in the trenches. Gosh, sorry, brain today. But they're traveling together alone, and that whole section, it just gave me, it was so emotional for me, because Kaladin is he is having a really emotional time and finding hope. So that, sorry if that's spoiling you as well. It's not really like I guess it's a spoiler, but so anyways, not a severe spoiler. So anyways, yeah, so I love that really emotional section, but I think this time through, book 1 is my favorite, because I just love learning about Kaladin. I thought that I wouldn't be excited to revisit all his backstory and everything, but I'm enjoying it so much. So, yay. Okay, so what I marked was, and then he was there. Squad leader, Stormblessed. Kaladin's spear came as if out of nowhere, narrowly deflecting the blow that was to have killed Sen. Kaladin set himself in front of Sen, alone, facing down 6 spearmen. He didn't flinch. He charged. Yeah. It was really cool seeing Kaladin from Sen's perspective. I think that's the first time we see him. We see Kaladin arrive on the scene at this point. And it's at this point that I started getting emotional my first time reading through. Like, the beginning was like somewhat disconnected from my feelings. Like, I was interested and I was like, ooh, the world building is really good here. And because I'd already read the Mistborn Era 1 trilogy, I was like, I trust Brandon Sanderson to bring the world building around in the end. So I was like, I have deep trust that Brandon Sanderson is going to bring the world building around. But, excuse me. But I really also was like, yeah, I just didn't, this is when I started being emotional the first time I read it through, and the second time as well, that's when I started being emotional. So yeah, I love Kaladin. So, okay, the next is still in Kaladin's point of view, or it's in Kaladin's section. They're not all necessarily from his point of view, but this section of this chapter is. This is after the scene with Sen, after Sen dies, and Kaladin is in the carts, like he's with the slave trader, who also is important. Anyways, so if I'd taken one chol, they might have just beaten me, but a whole herd, 17 head, he chuckled to himself, admiring his own audacity. So I marked that because of chol. So something else that I'm really enjoying doing this time around as I'm reading the Stormlight Archives is going through fan art. Have you guys looked at the Stormlight fan art? Because there's so much out there. So I thought I would just show you. I was like, I have to look up what a chol looks like again so that I can picture it. And look at this artwork. It is insane. It looks like, I mean, can you guys see that? He's like a big lobster, basically. I just am obsessed. It's so good. He looks like, like a lobster, but also it reminded me kind of like Paris from the Pokemon, the original Pokemon Paris. So that I had to look up the fan art, and I just thought Chol is the perfect name also for a beast of burden. Like, it's not like the name that you would give to something really bright, right? It's like something docile that you use for heavy work. that Chol is the perfect name for something like that. Okay, and then the next tag is also in Kaladin's perspective. So we're talking to Syl at this point. She's asking him, why don't you fight? You did before. Now you've stopped. And Kaladin says, why do you care, spirit? And Syl cocks her head. I don't know, she said, as if surprised at herself, but I do. Isn't that odd? And so my comment on this was the Syl Kaladin duo. I also forgot how much I loved that. But the way Syl can cheer Kaladin up, like Kaladin is extremely determined, and despite his depression, you can tell that he really fights it because of how many failed attempts he has had trying to like pull himself up by the bootstraps and save everybody around him. He did it over and over and over and over again. And it wasn't until he got so absolutely destroyed by Amaram that he ended up giving up, because he's like, there's no point in me continuing to do this. I just keep losing everyone and somehow I end up surviving. It's like a curse. And we know now it's because Syl is with him. But yeah, I just remember when I was reading it the first time through, I don't remember who said it exactly, but somebody was saying that, Kaladin's kind of a emo boy, boo-hoo, poor me, like he's just such a whiner. And I was thinking, he tried so many times and failed so many times. And so that's why he had given up, and plus his depression on top of that. It's not like he was just listening to his depression all the time, because he clearly knows, he doesn't know what depression is, but he knows that it's something he feels regularly, and he's like used to feeling that. And so he fought it for so long. But, after you lose so many times, eventually you learn maybe this is not the way to do it. And he just really felt like there was no point in him continuing that. So to me, it was like, I don't know who would actually, why would you actually think that about Kaladin? He tries so hard. So yeah, I just love that about Kaladin, and I love that Syl is there to cheer him up when he's at his worst. And I'm always just like, please listen to Syl. I know there are points in the future parts in the book where I'm just like, why don't you just listen to Syl? But anyways, okay, so the last tag that I have here is quite a bit later, and it's at the end of Shallan's section. And I think Shallan's section is well paced, and it's definitely not bad, but I remember she just wasn't quite as like, I wasn't as quite as drawn to her. And when I was previously reading the book. So, I think that must be the case here too, because I wasn't marking it up. But I'm really enjoying her narrative still. She's just not as intriguing to me, I guess. I don't know. But there are other people who do not feel that way about Shallan and really love her sections, which that's awesome. I think because I also know people who like Dalinar's their favorite. And like I said, there are people who really didn't enjoy Kaladin's perspective because of his depression. So yeah, I think Brandon, that's shows how skillful Brandon Sanderson is, that we can all be reading this and have different favorite characters and different parts that call to us. Like, he clearly knows how a variety of kinds of fantasy readers think. I'm not even normally a fantasy reader anymore, and I still love this. And so that is really just showing how skillful he is as an author. Okay, so the next quote is, she would apprentice herself to Yasna Kholin, scholar heretic, not for the education, not for the prestige, but in order to learn where she kept her soulcaster, and then Shallan would steal it. So I just did not remember that we were getting, like, Shallan's goals this early. Like, I thought it was later that she was telling us what her actual plan with Yasna was. So yeah, it's just like what I was saying earlier. It's Sanderson's pacing is really good. He knows how to hook you and drag you through. Like, he's gone through it so many times. That's why it's a masterpiece. And I don't know if this is true or not, but it seems to me like the first one is like a perfect fantasy novel, and kind of as the series goes on, it's not like it's not perfect, but this book just sings. It just sings. Like, I think he's just gone through it so many times. But I could be wrong about this, but it just seems like the future books, maybe he didn't go through it quite as many revision times, you know. But I could be totally wrong about that. He might have rewritten all of the books this many times. But anyways, yeah, book one is just, like I said, so perfect. So, okay, now we're going into chapter 6, which is Bridge 4. So back with Kaladin. Yes, my next note is Bridge 4, because Bridge 4 is finally mentioned. It's when Gaz sends Kaladin to Bridge 4. Our first time through Stormlong 2020, we called the people chatting on the stream Bridge 4. So to me, that's like, yes. And we even have like stickers with Bridge 4 on them, like the Bridge 4 glyph. Okay, the next tag is in Shallan's section. So Shallan found herself laughing at the Ardent's expression, and she took a memory of him sitting there, admiration and perplexity blending on his face as he studied the picture, rubbing his bearded chin with one finger. I had totally forgotten about Capsule, and currently where I am in the book, we haven't even we haven't gone to Shallan's perspective in quite a while. So yeah, I had totally forgotten about Capsule, but wow, what a character. But also, I think remembering that Shallan has eidetic memory, like a photographic memory. I don't know if that's actually a thing, but it's clearly something in the book because she could take a memory of it with her eyes and her mind. So yeah, I just marked that because I thought, that is so cool. I wish I could do that. Oh, I just also want to say, Capsule's humor, as I'm reading through it this time, it's actually making me laugh. Like, Brandon Sanderson's humor sometimes feels a bit forced. Like, the section I'm in right now is the section with Wit, where Elhokar is just given Sadius the control, that he's made him High Prince of Information. And Wit's jokes in that scene are just like, they feel so forced. Although there is one joke that made me laugh, but Capsul's jokes made me laugh, I remember, throughout this scene. I just thought he was so funny. So it was interesting hearing from Capsul about why he's talking with Yasna. So Shallan nodded, rising. You want to try to convert her, I presume? She presents a unique challenge. I don't think I could live with myself if I didn't at least try to persuade her. So yeah, I thought that was an interesting, because obviously that's not his motive for being here. So maybe that's why I marked it. It's because like that is not his motive for being here. Okay, now we're moving into chapter 8, Near the Flame. And this looks like Shallan's perspective again. So the quote that I have here is, angry people unsettled her. She couldn't help but think of her father in one of his tirades. Couldn't help but hear screams, bellows, whimpers. Was she weak because confrontation unsettled her so? She felt that she was. And I think I marked that because angry people also unsettle me quite a lot. So that's why I marked that. But anyways, so that was a personal marking. Okay. The game wasn't about the cards. It was about them trying to figure out how I was cheating, and me trying to figure out how to keep them from hauling me off. So this is one of the sailors, Yaub, talking with Shallan about why it was okay for him to be cheating in a game of cards. And this is, I think, also something that Brandon Sanderson excels at, is like portraying how different people think differently about things. Like, to me, it's like hard to justify. I wouldn't have been able to come up with that myself. Like, how could somebody justify cheating in cards? And there we go. There's his justification. The real game isn't about cards. It's about me cheating and getting away with it. That's the game for him. So, and then next is, but Shallan would never get to take that offer. It was like a glass sphere with no gemstone at the center. Pretty, but worthless. Was it not better to take at least one chance at getting the position she needed now? And there's another situation where it's like, she's really getting into her head here, and it's different from how I would think about a problem. Literally, if someone told me no twice, I would be like, okay, it's definitely a hard no. This happened recently, and Kevin was like, actually, that's not we're gonna grieve that. You know, that hard no makes no sense, and we are not going to agree with it. So we're gonna keep pushing. So yeah, interesting. It's very different even from how Kaladin would probably think about the situation. So yeah, Shallan is like, I'm gonna figure out a way to get what I want. She definitely thinks of things like in a different way, and it really makes her feel like a totally separate character, and I really like that. Okay, next quote. Okay, wisdom of the heralds, Liren said absently, repeating a lecture he'd given many times before. Deathspren and Rotspren hate winter. It will keep them away. That's interesting. So this is a conversation between Cal and his father, the surgeon Liren, and I think I marked it because they go on talking about like who the heralds are, and Cal's like, they're demons, and you know, his dad's like, no, you're mixing them up with the radiance. And so now I'm like, oh man, see, this is what I'm talking about with the terms, the radiance, the heralds, and I'm like, what are they in my head? It's really fuzzy what the difference is between them, just like it is for Kaladin. And I feel like he's signaling to us that in this point of the book, it's actually okay to be fuzzy on these things. And so he sets you straight, but there's a lot going on. So it's not like we're expected to follow all of this if it's difficult. For some people, I think that they are, you know, following all of this really well. But this was interesting too, that Deathspren and Rotspren hate winter. It will keep them away, because I feel like, is that true? Like in our world, if we had Deathspren and Rotspren, really what we have is bacteria. But I feel like winter and spring is when it's really difficult for people. Like, that's the 6th season. So it's interesting that he was talking about Rotspren being kept away during the winter. But anyways, maybe Rotspren is more apt to grow during summer because it's hotter. So I don't know, maybe winter is supposed to kill off the Deathspren and Rotspren. Okay, next tag. And what of those who protect and defend? The one who saves lives by taking lives. So this is Kaladin really grappling with the gray nature of war, because his father is like super black and white about it at this point, saying there is no way to save lives by killing. That's like, yeah, it's like, that's like trying to stop a storm by blowing harder. Ridiculous. You can't protect by killing, which is one way that people think about it. There are, I know, pacifists in the world who do think about it like this, but in my mind, it's a lot more complicated than that, because sometimes people are evil and they actively try to hurt and maim the weak and the vulnerable, and it's the job of the strong to stand up and protect the weak and the vulnerable. And so that's what Kaladin's talking about, and he understands this even as a child. So I just love Kaladin so much. But I love Lirin too. I actually love their relationship. Yeah, but anyways. Okay, chapter 11, Droplets. So I marked the epigraph at the beginning of this chapter. 3 of 16 ruled, but now the broken one reigns. Yeah, so this was something that somebody was saying as they were dying. I forget what those are called. There's a word for them. I looked it up. But so that is referring to what in part 2 we end up seeing. We are seeing, you guys can look it up if you want, the epigraphs for Way of Kings and what they mean, like as a whole. I think it must be in different parts of the book. It's different kinds of epigraphs we're getting from different sources, rather. So I don't want to spoil things too much if you haven't looked that up and you want to just discover it for yourself. But, excuse me. So anyways, that is something, I think I marked it because I basically don't understand it. But anyways. Next, why was it that the scientists were so excited to discover facts that farmers had known for generations and generations? Oh, yeah, I think that's true too. There are people who in their, this is something that I feel like is important to understand. People who are professionals at their jobs often know that something is true, even if they don't know the why of it, but they've seen it in action and they know it's true. It's kind of like learning a language because through inundation and speaking. Like, you can speak the language, so you understand enough of how it works to do that, but if you can't like read it physically or you don't know the grammar rules, it's like, why? Who knows why? It just is this way. And that's the way the farmers are thinking about it. But scientists want to discover the why, and that's why scientists are excited. They want to discover the why between how things are. So yeah, I thought that was an interesting quote though, because that is how people in certain professions think about it. Like, don't overcomplicate it. Let's just get the job done. Like, that's something, that is a perspective that I have encountered. So, the world just changed, Gaz, Kaladin said, leaning in close. I died down at that chasm. Now you've got my vengeful spirit to deal with. I like cheered at this part because Kaladin is sort of getting his spirit back. He's planning to actually kill himself, and then Syl cheers him up, and he's like, okay, I'm gonna go like figure out a way to make Gaz work with me on saving the Bridgemen's lives. So yeah, I just love that. Okay, what did I... Okay, no, my quote... Sometimes I'm reusing flags from previous books, so some of the things that I'm writing on the flags are actually from different books. So I won't read those to you. Okay, so now I'm right before the interludes, but it's at the end of this Kaladin chapter, the same one. So Teft, we're learning Teft's name, and I marked that because I feel like that's the first Bridgeman that we're meeting and learning his name, maybe, or maybe Rock is, but I feel like Teft is the first one. And then the final part for this section that I marked was, It was the warmth of decisions made and purpose seized. It was responsibility. Yeah, see, when you're addicted to accomplishing things in life, that is a good feeling. Sometimes I feel like that. Like, I'm really just enjoying my life. I'm enjoying getting things done. That's a great feeling when you're just enjoying the work that you're doing. So that's why I marked that. Versus like sometimes in life, the things that you're doing, you don't enjoy and you just have to do them. And then you can find refuge in things that you actually enjoy, like in your free time. And sometimes there are seasons of life like that. But when you're like addicted to life and you just love living it, that's such a great feeling when you're going through a good period in your life. Okay, we're finally meeting Dalinar. So I forgot to like check. Let me see. We're going into the interludes, but those were really short. So now my next... Okay, the section with Non-Balad though was super creepy. Was it not? Like, I forgot about how creepy Non-Balad's sections are. Like, there is something wrong with that poor boy. Like, he's definitely experienced some trauma. Okay, but we're in part 2 now. The Illuminating Storms, which is Dalinar, Kaladin, and Adolin. So, we're in Adolin or Dalinar's perspective right now. I'm not sure whose. But... it says, strange how much of the king's actions made sense when explained that way. It's Adolin's perspective. Adolin looked up at his father. How can the others whisper that he's a coward? Can't they see his wisdom? So what's going on here is Adolin... So Dalinar has this really admirable faith in Elhokar and this really admirable faithfulness to help Elhokar grow into the king that Dalinar is sure Elhokar can be as Gavilar's son. And so they're dealing... Dalinar is constantly in this position of trying to drum up support and enthusiasm for Elhokar. And this is one of those situations. And I just marked it and I put so wise. Like, Dalinar is just so cool. Yeah, he's just made of good stuff. Okay, moving on. Why did I mark this? Oh, my Mad Lib scene. I marked a Mad Lib scene. Okay, I won't talk about that because we'll talk about that on our Mad Libs live stream. Okay, I have 3 on this one page. Whoa. Oh, it's because it's explaining things, how things are working. So it explains on this page about the gem hearts, how everybody's fighting for gem hearts now, and that's why the Vengeance Pact has been sort of set aside to some degree, and they're just seeking out gemstones, basically because they want to be rich. They want to steal the resources of the Progeny and use them. So, yeah. And each High Prince wanted those gem hearts. So they're fighting each other to some degree, like they are competing with each other to get the gem hearts. And competition was doctrine to the Alethi. They could have taken turns to get the gem hearts, but that's not the Alethi way. We value competition. So the Alethi is such an interesting culture. And also, it was a really interesting choice to write it from the Alethi perspective from book 1. Because when you realize what's really going on here, it is like your brain is turned inside out. And I don't want to say anything else because I don't want to spoil future books. I don't remember what all we learned by the end of book 1, but I just think it was a brilliant choice to start from the Alethi point of view because it's a very conscious book. Brandon Sanderson did everything like very consciously, and he has a moral vision for the book for sure, but it's complex. It's not preachy. It's not like the whole time through the book you're just like, yep, this is where he is morally. Like, you're like questioning. You're like, this was a bad choice to write from the Alethi perspective. Like, that's a super problematic choice. And I've actually seen reviewers say that it's a super problematic choice to start with the Alethi perspective. And again, I don't want to explain that in case you're not sure of what's going on here yet. But I think it was a brilliant choice because he's getting us to identify with them to some degree by showing us some really admirable Alethis trying to do their best in the culture they've been born into. So, moving on. Okay, we're back in Kaladin's head. I don't know, it's a different chapter for sure. Each of the 10 war camps filled its own crater and was filled with an incongruous mix of soul-cast buildings, shanties, and tents. And, okay, so this was interesting because I did not remember that the war camps were set in craters and that they were filling craters. But when I looked at the maps, like when we were on reading sprints, Rich was like, I'm pretty sure that's on the map. And so I looked, and sure enough, it was on the map. So the war camps were on the map the whole time, and I just didn't ever see it. Okay. So 20 next mark is 20 bridges charged down from the lumberyard and toward the shattered plains. Kaladin noticed a group of bridgemen from Bridge 7 watching with relief. They'd been on duty until the first afternoon bell. Okay, so what I was marking here was, I wish I knew the language of the Alethi. The word they use here for... Oh, but the word's not there. Well, anyways, the words that are being used to command them. Oh, I think I just put it in the wrong place. Kaladin commanded the men to lift the bridge. That's what I meant to mark. So Kaladin is giving orders to Bridge 4, and he uses a certain Alethi word. I'm assuming it's Alethi that he's speaking to them, unless there's like some other common language that all of them can understand. But I was like, I really wish that we knew what the language was. Like, I wish that Brandon Sanderson also, like Tolkien, was a philologist and came up with a language, because I just find languages so interesting. But that would have been probably another 10 years before we got the series finished. So on one hand, I wish that there was languages associated with these cultures, and on the other hand, I totally understand why there isn't. You can guess some stuff just from their names, but anyways. Oh yeah, and here's a picture of the war camps. Yeah. So these are the war camps. They're set in craters on the Shattered Plains. And there's a scene where Dalinar has to like rush from one war camp, and he's trying to get to his own war camp before a high storm stops him and traps him and makes him experience the high storm visions and his own madness, according to everybody, in front of everybody. And it's like, why can't he just, like, this is why. It's because he would have had to travel like a certain amount of, time in order to get there. It's just interesting. Brandon Sanderson has thought of everything except adding a language. And probably that was a conscious choice. He probably didn't even forget. He probably just was like, I don't want to come up with a whole new language for every culture in this book series. Okay. Next quote is, fighting is not the only thing of value a man can do. Yeah, I love this because this is this is interesting because Dalinar is talking to Renarin about why he shouldn't be ashamed of not being a fighting man because of his illness. Dalinar is just such a good dude, like making his son feel better about this, because clearly Alethi culture is like all about war. Like that's what they care about. So when Renarin feels useless because he can't take part in it, Dalinar is like taking himself out of this mindset of war and yeah, identifying with his son and his needs. So meeting his son where his son is. The Ardents were very specific about that. Yes, the highest calling of men was to join battle in the afterlife to reclaim the Tranquilline Halls. But the Almighty accepted the excellence of any man or woman, regardless of what they did. And it sounds like very Viking, right? The fact that you're just going to be fighting all the time in their version of heaven. But it kind of also makes sense because we see that is what was happening in the whole section with Kalak and Jezrien in the prelude. Like, that is what was happening before Alethi culture bloomed. It was a constant war about these desolations. The desolations were happening, and so it basically was like war. So that makes sense that that's what their religion is all about as well. It's because probably in Alethkar, war was the whole purpose. So there is a reason why men are born with a certain valor and some women as well, and they are necessary. It's because sometimes courage is needed to go to war and protect the weak and things like that. And so that is something that's built in here, which I actually do appreciate. Because, I mean, war, nobody really, like, unless you're actually evil, nobody's like, yes, war, exciting, so happy, it's a great thing. Like, we all wish that there wasn't war, but sometimes evil people do actually make you go to war. And that is what it's dealing with to some degree, but it's not that we don't know yet what's going on with the world building in book 1. So anyways, his chosen call was dueling. By working with the Ardents to make personal goals and fulfill them, he could prove himself to the Almighty. So this is from Adolin's perspective. And this is, again, just showing off the religion of the Alethi. And it really sounds a lot like something that Dostoevsky was addressing in, like, Notes from the Underground. And, like, it sounds like objective... I forget what the term is at the moment, but it's something I've been studying because Chernyshevsky and other Russian writers during the time that Dostoevsky was living in Russia, they were trying to convince everybody that if everybody just did what they most deeply feel is right and took care of themselves, things would go like that. Like, get rid of all the other nonsense that society and religion tells you is right. Throw all that out. It's only what you feel to be right that matters. And that's what you should do. That's kind of the idea of it. But it's kind of funny because in What Is to Be Done by Chernyshevsky, which is what Dostoevsky was writing Notes from the Underground to combat, the people in What Is to Be Done were being self-sacrificial and altruistic, but they were still saying, I'm doing this because it's for the betterment of mankind. And so for me, that is aligned with my objective goal is this is what's best for mankind. So that's what's best for me. So that's what I need to do. So it's really like this, it's like a similar, you're acting similarly. But anyways, it's just interesting to me because that's kind of what Alethkar's religion, the Alethi religion sounds like to me. They have to make personal goals and fulfill them. And that's how they prove themselves to the Almighty. So anyways, once again, Brandon Sanderson, fascinating philosophy and religion developed in this series. Okay, the next is back in Kaladin's perspective. We're almost done with my notes. Maybe this is already like 45 minutes long, so maybe I'll just post this and I'll just do like 3 updates or something with the Way of Kings. Okay, so Bright Lord Sadeas, Gaz said grimly, told Lamoral to let you keep the soldiers, but to forbid them food or pay when they're unable to work. Said it would show why he's forced to leave the Bridgemen behind. Oh, this made me so mad. So this is when Kaladin is told by Gaz that Sadeas will no longer let the Bridgemen who've been injured be fed because it's a drain on the Alethi military's budget, basically. If you get injured as a Bridgeman, not only do you not get treated, you get left behind to die, and now you won't even get fed if somebody does help you back home. So now Kaladin is going to have to make a plan to save the Bridgemen. So, and he does, as we know. Okay, this is my last quote. Oh, this is the joke that I was telling you about that I thought was funny, that Wit makes in the cafeteria scene. Cafeteria is probably not the right word, but where everybody's eating. And it's right before Elokar. No, it's right. This is, Dalinar is learning from Wit what Elokar has just done. And that is, he said, when he learns that Elokar has been telling people that about his wanting to no longer take part in the Vengeance Pact, that's something that Dalinar talked to Elokar about privately, and Wit's like, well, it's not private anymore. Elokar told everybody. Dalinar says, Stormfather, and Wit says, no, I'm Wit, but but I understand how easy a mistake that is to make. That actually did make me laugh. No, I'm wit. Because it was like, you're like living with Dalinar in the moment about how serious this is. That Elhokar has totally just outed Dalinar to like all of the Alethi, and who now think that he is a coward. And he's like, Stormfather, that's terrible. And then Wit, actually, I'm Wit, you know, but it's an easy mistake to make. I can understand how you would make that mistake. And knowing, I'm really interested in reading Wit's history. I forget what the book is called, but there's going to be like a prelude book to all of the Cosmere books. It's like, or a prologue book. I forget what it's called at the moment. And that will tell us Wit's story finally, who actually we know is Hoid, not Wit. But in this story so far, he is Wit. So anyways, that's it for my notes for now. So I'm actually quite a bit further on past that point in my reading. I'm just about near the end of chapter 23. So maybe I'll pick up with you guys in a separate video starting in chapter 4. So thanks so much for watching this with me, guys. And I'll talk to you very soon.